Welcome to the 41st episode of Impact Media Presents. Where do we go from here? Healing and rebuilding. I am Kelly Redmond, your host and Executive Director of Impact Media and Entertainment Coalition, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Are you concerned about your future and the future of this country? Are you anxious and worried about a peaceful transfer of power? During this episode of Impact Media Presents, we're continuing our Where Do We Go From Here discussion and our series and highlighting one of my favorite people and advisors, Dr. Helen Williams, who is currently the Dean of the Graduate School of Psychology at Pepperdine. And she's that among so many other things. And we'll be discussing critical things that we can do to begin a path towards healing, both personally and collectively as a nation. Today is one of the most important conversations that we've had to date. And it's about how we heal and rebuild after the election and after the last 4 years. How are you today, Dr. Williams?
I am wonderful. And I am just so overjoyed that you would have me as your guest this morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for thinking of me and including me. It is indeed my privilege and my honor to be with you.
Thank you so much. And as I shared with you, it's been a privilege and an honor just to know you for the majority of the time. You were one of the first people that I met when I moved to California. And you have just been such a profound voice of wisdom and balance in my life. And I had to share you with the rest of the world. And it's just such a blessing that how our lives have been interwoven over the years. And now Jada is at Pepperdine where you are. And it's just, God is so awesome.
Yes.
And just very, very grateful for you. And like I said, I couldn't think of anyone else to have this conversation with. As you know, we've been talking about you coming on, and this was the absolute right time, the perfect time to have this conversation, with you, as I mentioned, because of the way that you look at and process the issues and how we can create a strategic plan, because you're all about action items and what to do, things that we can do to heal from this. And I love the fact that you bring such a holistic perspective to it. You bring your faith, you bring your education, you bring your psychology background and other things that you tap into. So I'm just so excited to have you here. Do me a favor before we get started and just tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself, about your background, so they know more fully who you are.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that. I think that is critically important, and it is actually an action item for each and every one of us. And that is that we know who we are.
Yes.
That we identify for ourselves and for others who we are. Yes. And that we walk in the fullness of who we are. Yes. I am a sharecropper's daughter. I was born in the backwoods of South Carolina. At the age of 3 years old, I was picking cotton, cropping tobacco. Wow. I dug potatoes. I did all that hard labor work on a farm, on someone else's farm, that my family, having come out of slavery, my family, at least that is our knowledge. We've not done that genealogy tracing yet fully.
Oh, I can help you there. I know some people. I've had some genealogists, certified genealogists, and African ancestry president, Gina Page. I can get you connected to get that. It's so important to know.
It's so important. But yes. Coming out of that experience, I treasure that as who I am. Yes, I am the dean of the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine University, and most people stop there. Most people stop.
So much more.
There's so much more.
Yes.
I am that little girl that picked cotton. I am that little girl that chased chickens, that slopped
Mm.
the hogs, right? I am that little girl that sat on the porch with a torn screen door behind me. You know how the screen tears and rolls up,
Oh, yes.
and dreamed of what life could be,
Mm.
because it's got to be better than this.
Mm.
I would hear airplanes flying over and see them and wonder where they were going, who was on that airplane,
Yeah.
right? How can I get to be on an airplane? Those thoughts were running through my head as a child. And so I quickly learned that education was the key,
Yeah.
the primary key for getting an opportunity to advance myself, my family, and my community. And I've
Yeah.
said a mouthful right there.
Yes.
Myself, my family, and my community. I am all that is therein. I am Reverend Dr. Helen Easterling Williams, an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yes.
And I serve at First AME Los Angeles and am delighted to do so. All of that shapes who I am. I am a mother of two wonderful daughters. I keep saying to God, one is a neurologist,
Oh,
the
wow.
other one is a lawyer. So, Kelly, here we are. This little girl picking cotton alongside her mother, her grandmother, grandfather, all of us generations in the fields working for someone else. And today I sit as Reverend Dr. Helen Easterling Williams,
Yes.
feeding myself, my family, and my community to the best of my ability. And I have two daughters, one a neurologist and the other a lawyer by faith.
Hmm.
It's not because I am so great. It's not because I have done so many wonderful things. It is because my faith has driven me and God has blessed the works of my hands.
Yes.
That is who I am. And I have three wonderful grandchildren who are following in the footsteps. Myself, my family, my community. This is generational.
And that's what
Next
needs
generation.
to be for all of us. And when we talk about healing and
Mm,
healing for our community, being able to embrace all of that,
yes.
because there are some who may have gained the personal success and focus on their family
Mhm.
success, but don't go to that third part of
Yes.
that very important pie that you just broke down, that three parts sections.
Mhm.
It's important to include focusing on your community as well, and
Yeah.
helping to bring and uplift those who we may not be related to, who may not be in our circles.
Mhm.
It's so, so critical.
It
And
is
again,
critical. It is critical. And in fact, I would not be who I am today were it not for members of my community. See, I'm getting choked up now because I remember uh, a moment when I was the soloist on the choir as a little girl, having moved to Baltimore. Growing up in Baltimore, I'm soloist on the choir, so we were all to go to choir rehearsal, and I stopped on the way and played jump rope with my friends because I didn't need to go to choir rehearsal. I got this. And my sisters and brothers went on to church for rehearsal. When they came back, I connected with them and we all went home. But when I arrived at home, my mother stood at the door and said, "So you didn't go to choir rehearsal?" Because the people in our community were so connected,
yes,
so connected. They saw me, they knew I was, asked, Helen, aren't you supposed to be at choir rehearsal? Oh, I'm good. I'm all is well. No, I'm okay. Yeah, I was okay until I got home because the community, we,
Yes.
we knew each other. We took care of each other. And that's just so critically important. I remember mentors that came out of my community
Yes.
that sowed into my life, that spoke words of wisdom, that encouraged me to do A, B, C, and D when I didn't think I could, but they saw something in me that I couldn't see. And that all came from community. I sit here,
Yes.
Reverend Dr. Helen, Dean, my mom, whatever you want to call me, because of all that has been sown into me.
Yes.
Community is critically important.
You know, you talked about that the community from the days of our past. I also was a beneficiary of having that type of community,
Yeah.
and seeing, my parents take responsibility, for, the community, around us, uh, the way they were responsive and supportive of, my friends and my circle, how they embraced them. And,
Yeah.
and any child or, person in the community, just having that eye that you talked about, and communication with your neighbors, and that was inbred in me. And it, in this generation, as a parent, and it's just built within me,
Yeah.
having that kind of response. It's just very different navigating these days, because
Mhm.
it's, you are taking a huge risk to say something to a young person sometimes these days.
True.
But I
It's
take it, and I embarrass Jada. When I feel it, something has to be said, I'm going to say it, because
yeah.
I believe I have a responsibility to say it. And so it's not just correction or intervention, but it is also caring,
Yes.
and being involved in trying to be supportive when someone is hurting and you have access to a resource. It's like, okay, well, you may not have asked, but is there a way that I can be helpful and supportive here?
Mhm.
um that's community to me.
Yeah.
And I, like you, I miss, those days of, and my neighbors may think I'm interesting, especially here as I'm trying to build a sense of community. But it's just, who I am and who I think we should be. I think those are some of the things that are missing, these days. And I thank you so much for bringing that up. And you mentioned mentors. Mentors have played such a huge part in my life. I would love to hear about some of your mentors.
You know, I have had mentors. Well, mentors, and understand that mentoring comes in many different forms.
Absolutely.
It isn't always a weekly, hourly meeting with a
For sure.
person for 2, 3 years, where you delve into who you are. That's therapy, you know.
Mhm.
And there's a place for that. There's a
Yes.
place for that. But many have mentored me. Let's see, as I think of mentors, actually, I think of, we we spoke earlier about church hurt. I think
Yes.
of when I was a child, elementary school, our pastor's wife, the first lady.
Mhm.
She was not particularly well liked in the congregation.
Okay.
But I ascribe such honor to the title of pastor, reverend, church deacon, all of those titles. And first lady was important to me. She asked me to babysit her sons. And so I was so honored. And I remember I had to pass their house to get to school. And one morning she saw me and she said, "Oh, come, you can ride. I'll take you." So I got in the car and we went to school. Took me to school. And that became a habit that I would be there at the right time and ride to school with her. And one morning, she asked me something, and this is really, really deep. She asked me something, and I responded, and I split a verb.
Mm.
I did not articulate clearly. I said something like dis and dat, dees and does. You know how we do.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and I'm just a child talking, going to junior high school now, talking to this lady whom I revered. And she was having a bad day. And she said, "See, that's what's wrong with our people. We don't even know how to speak correctly." And I was hurt. I was hurt, but I listened.
Yes.
Nobody will ever say that to me again. And so
Mm-hmm.
I can code switch really easily.
With the best of them, huh?
The best of them. I can stand on the corner in one of the roughest neighborhoods and be
Same
down
here.
and be down. All right. And I can sit in a boardroom,
Yes.
speak clearly, intellectually. I can, analyze a situation and be very strategic about responding.
Yes.
I can, because she spoke that way to me. She never knew it. And even
Mm.
now she's gone, she's dead and gone, but that was mentoring.
Yes,
You
definitely.
know, unintentional, but mentoring. Hurtful, but mentoring. Sometimes mentoring does not feel good. If it feels good all the time, then something is wrong. It's not true mentoring. Okay.
Yes.
I have a mentor who, and I have a lot of African American female mentors who spoke life into me even when I didn't see it. I remember
Yeah.
my high school guidance counselor who spoke about Curtis, a young man in my class, my senior class, and saying, definitely Curtis is going to college. So, what are the rest of you going to do? Causing us to think about our future. And I had no idea. I hadn't
Mm.
even given it thought. And she said, of course you're going to college. I didn't know what college was.
Mm.
She saw that in me, and she gave me a Barron's Guide to Colleges, a very thick book.
Yes.
I sat and went through that book and selected colleges. I think I applied to 6 of them and got in. And my mother said, okay, we will support you, but we don't know what to do with this. We don't know what college is.
Right.
But
Right.
whatever you want to do, Helen, I'm down with you. And I have I have several now that have mentored me through my marriage, through job changes. But Kelly, I want to share this morning that all of my mentors have not been African American females.
Mm-hmm.
I have some very strong, influential white males that have mentored me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give them credit. Because
Yes.
one, for instance, when I interviewed for the job, it was rigorous. And I thought, okay, he is going to be my nemesis.
Mm.
I am going to have to work. If I get this job, I'm going to have to really work with him because this guy is not in my corner.
Mm-hmm.
On my first day of work, I arrived. I went to my office, which had been vacant for a while. So a vacant space becomes a catch-all space for whatever
Yes.
needed to be cleaned out. I walked into my office and found that very white male, Doug was his name, who sitting on the floor in a white shirt. He had taken off his jacket, he had rolled up his sleeves, and he was cleaning out cupboards.
Wow.
And I was in shock. So immediately I'm thinking, what are they trying to hide? What's going on? I need to know this because this just doesn't happen, right?
Right.
And so I'm curious and I want to know what's going on here. What is this? He looked at me and he said, "You are a real lady. You deserve better than this."
Ooh, so true. And
Sister?
so amazing for him to personally take it upon himself to make sure that you
Yeah,
were treated the way you deserve to be treated.
I was floored. I was
Yes.
floored. I repented. But I was floored. But that's the kind of mentoring. And he later wrote a letter of reference for me to get into a doctoral program. And there have been many like that along the way.
Yes.
And they taught me to see into others
Yes.
and to seed into others, to sow into others, because it yet remains to be seen what God has prepared for each of us. We don't know who we're going to become. And so when you see something special in someone, or it may not even be special, but just something that perhaps they don't, whatever you see,
Yes.
name it. Name it for them.
Yes.
Seed into them, sow into them. We walk into a room. We walk into a room and we have eyes and we see everything in the room. If
Yes.
we are wise, we are mindful of our space, we see everything in the room. It is important for us to understand that there's one thing we cannot see, and
Yes.
that is ourselves. We can see everything but except ourselves. So it's
Absolutely.
important. So when someone sees something in you and seeds in you, you should nurture that and grow that. It's mentors. I can't count them, but I surely can remember them and thank
Yes.
because I am because of them.
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way. And I've been so fortunate and blessed to have mentors within my family and just every step along the way. And I was, even as a child, I gravitated to adults. I can even remember like being at my childhood friend, Yvette, who went to St. Thomas with me,
Mhm.
elementary school. We're still connected on Facebook. She may see this, and she's a
I
fabulous
said,
businesswoman. She and her husband are entrepreneurs. They own all kinds of business. But I remember being at her birthday party, and the girls were kind of in another room, but I actually was spending time with the adults and her older sister. I remember that memory. Um, I don't even know why I was there or why, I think I remember talking about purses or looking at my mother and grandmother and aunts teased me all the time about the things that I was drawn to as a little girl and, taking everybody's purse and walking in my mother's high heel shoes and things like that. But I gravitated toward older women and people. And it probably started because of my close relationship with my grandmother and my uncle Bob, who it was my great uncle who I spent a lot of time with, and my uncles, my
mhm.
uncle Robert, Uncle Bruce, and then all my on my dad's side, which is huge. But having, that strong family support and
Yes.
realizing that everyone doesn't have that.
Mm.
And so I've always
Mm.
tried to, I've gone around and adopted families, some to be, they've adopted me into their family.
Mhm.
But then, and I didn't really need adopting, but I love
Yeah,
collecting good people. But there are
yeah.
definitely some that have crossed my path who don't necessarily have, strong family ties that I've, brought into, my family.
Mhm.
Um, and and I just think that's what that's why we're here.
Yeah.
We're all related and connected
Yes, we
anyway.
are. Okay, okay.
We don't know it or acknowledge it most of the time, but we are. So,
Related and connected. Years ago, I was in my first deanship, at the University of Delaware, and my administrative assistant was military trained, and she was clear that she was going to handle her position and handle it well, right? Um, and so she wanted to know who is it that when they call, I give them immediate access to you,
mhm.
right? And I said, "Oh my, that's a hard one." She said, "No, no. Who is your family?" I said, "That's a hard one because there's so many. There's so
Yeah.
many." She said, "No, I need two or three." I said, "Okay, my husband at the time, my two daughters, but you understand I have six biological sisters and brothers, right?
Mm,
And I have a slew of other sons and daughters, right?
yes.
Sons and daughters that n- must have immediate access, will expect to have immediate access." And she said, "Who are they?" And I said, "I'll spend all day trying to give you names, because in our community, and I believe it goes back to slavery days when um, families were split up and you had babies that were taken from mothers and placed on other plantations, sold to other plantations.
Yes.
They were not that person's biological child, but there was something deep inside the slave community that said, you take care of this one and this one, because we're all related. And so we got cousins all over the place. Hey, cousin,
Yes.
you know,
Exactly.
all over the place. We have this responsibility to reach out and embrace others, and that's that's what we can do today, even
Yes.
more so. Remember that and embrace that, because we don't live in this world alone, and you never know who to whom you're related. 6 degrees of separation, they say.
And
Well,
I believe it's closer than that.
yes,
I really do.
yes.
I
We
really, really
have this
do.
responsibility. So I could not tell Nancy who my children were. And even today, even today, not too long ago, a dear son, James Besgian, tall, curly haired white male, shows up at my office and says, "Is mom here? I need to see my mother, you know."
Yes.
And
Like, what?
confusion,
Who's this guy?
confusion all over the faces. And I get this call because I'm in the office, and I get Dean Williams. There's a young man here who says he's your son. His name is James Benjamin. Oh yes, please send him in. Please send my child. Come on in here.
Right.
They come in all colors, shapes, and sizes.
Yes.
We don't know who we've been separated so much that there is a
Mhm.
sense community is we embrace everyone. And
Yes.
as a part, you talk about healing. Where do we
Yes.
go from here? That's one thing we can do. We must reestablish that there are so many foster children. Shout out right now to the foster children in
Yes.
our nation
Yes.
who, like you say, who don't know who their parents are, or who do know but have been separated for whatever reason.
Yes.
Shout out to them and their tenacity. Shout
Yes.
out to foster parents who take that responsibility seriously. We
Yes.
all have a responsibility to reach out to someone else.
Absolutely.
Sowing seeds, sowing seeds.
Yes. That's exactly what it's about. And you're right. And I thank you so much for being so generous with your time this morning. We initially were going to do a tighter focus program, but you opened it up for us to have this more personal conversation, a more in-depth look into who you are, and to just kind of flow with where we need to go around this healing. And it's been a beautiful path to get right to this point. And it's like, without looking at a script, we just started flowing into what the discussion, was going to be. And you're right, that connectedness, to each other is so important. And it goes across racial lines, it goes across political parties, it goes across
Yes.
zip codes.
Yes.
We really do need to just stop and acknowledge that we're all connected, we're all related, and we're all in this together, like it or not. And it's like, how do you want to be, and how do you want us to be, moving forward? We all have a responsibility in this. It's not just pointing the finger at the others and what's wrong with them, or what they may have done to us, or what we may have perceived that they've done. But it's really, how are we being, in the response, as responsive to whatever's going on. And so let's dig into it. Let's dig into it. Let's start on the personal side. So if, people are concerned on both sides, people feel wronged, in some form or fashion over the last 4 years. People have been hurting. And I mean, especially, a lot of people are talking about 2020. Every year, there's always some ups and downs, good and bad. But this year in particular, it's pretty, people are feeling like, okay, this is overwhelming. The extent of the hurt, the extent of the loss, 2 global pandemics, what can people do to begin to heal? And then we'll come back and talk about rebuilding. But what can people do personally to heal?
Well, personally, I think we've really already said it. We must name it. We must figure out who we are.
Yes.
And our identity and our center. We must figure out who we are and what our center is, because that's our anchor. And that is, for me, a very spiritual space. I truly believe that we are all divine creatures in earthly vessels, living out a purpose, right? And so because we see so much in this earth, it is easy for us to get distracted.
Yes.
And tap into so many other things. We must know who we are and identify our anchor, the essence of who we are, where we stand. So that, because if we don't, we will be blown by every wind.
Absolutely.
Every wind. And we will become confused and lost and of no earthly good to anyone.
So how does someone do that practically? There are those of us who've been on a journey of self-discovery and knowing who we are and finding our voice, our authentic voice. But if someone doesn't have the tools or the resource, like, what are some practical things and places?
Right. Like I said earlier, we can walk into a room and see everything, but we cannot see ourselves. And we can look in a mirror and see ourselves. Each one of us can look into a mirror and see ourselves. And then we can determine that we like what we see. We must speak that affirmation to ourselves in the mirror. I am beautiful. I am wonderful. I am intelligent. You smart. You's kind.
Right.
This before. You smart. You's kind. And we need to say those wonderful affirmations to ourselves, even if we don't believe it. We say it until it becomes our reality.
Yes.
Okay. And then I think a most critical thing for us to do is to bring a circle of, I would say, three, maybe four, but I stick with three. I'm very biblical. I stick with
Yes.
three. Most trusted friends from different circles in our lives, from different circles, three of them, and ask them, what do you see? Who am I from your perspective? Tell me honestly, brutally, what do you see?
Yes.
And when we get that information from trusted mouths, we must sit with that.
Yes.
We must absorb that and fix it or flaunt it. When I say flaunt it, I don't just mean in a superficial way. I mean
Right.
live it out, embrace it, embody
Yes.
it, and grow in it because it's there for a reason. I
Yes.
think it's critically important to get three people who know you well and just let them be brutally honest with you.
I
That,
love it.
that's a really good one. And you can play that out at work if you feel safe. At
Hmm.
church, I strongly believe centering yourself in God. However, you see Him or her, center yourself in God. Find that spiritual core of who you are through prayer and fasting. If it's sitting by the ocean and listening to the waves, if it is because I just love myself some California. Uh,
Yes.
if it is digging in the dirt and planting seeds, I come with seeds again,
Yes.
planting seeds and watching them grow. Find the essence of who you are. Make a list of the things that you
Yes.
like, a
Yes.
list of the things that you do well, and a list of things that you don't like, and examine that for yourself. There's a lot of information in that. I think those
Absolutely.
are three things we can do.
Absolutely. I'd like to add to your list. And my mother encouraged me along this path uh, around a gratitude list, the things
Mm,
that we're grateful for. And when we focus on what we're grateful for,
yes,
it's it helps distract us from the things that we think are wrong, in our life. And we realize how much we have versus what we think we don't have that we
so
think
necessary.
we need. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
so, one other piece that I'd like you to delve into, because, especially I think among people of color and Black people in particular, we kind of shy away from getting professional help.
Oh,
And, with your professional background,
mhm.
in psychology as well as education, please speak to the importance
Yeah.
of getting help outside, because we all, no matter what
Hmm.
life we've lived, especially as Black people, we have experienced trauma, and
Trauma.
it has been passed down in the
Yeah.
generations, I believe, as Dr. Joy DeGruy outlined in her book, Post Traumatic Slave
Yeah.
Syndrome.
It's
So
real.
please speak to that.
Yes, it's real and it's necessary. When you go to church, if your pastor says to you, uh, and we always say this, take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there. That's real. Do that. Get on your knees. Mama did it, grandma did it in my life.
Yes.
Mama did it,
Yes.
grandma, for generations. Get on your knees and pray. Even if you don't know what to say, just be real with God because He
Yes.
already knows you. So pour
Yes.
out to Him because that in itself is therapy.
Yes.
Okay? It's spiritual therapy. And then, but there are moments when we need more. There are moments when we absolutely need more. I am not a psychologist by training. I have taken some psychology courses and I think I work well with psychologists. I'd like to think so. I am an educator by training.
Yes.
I believe it is important for persons to get therapy. There are
Yeah.
moments when you need somebody to talk to. You just need to lay down on somebody's couch or sit on someone's sofa, cross your legs, and just let it rip,
Yes.
right? And they can guide you. They are trained to guide you through those moments so that you have a self revelation. They're not going to tell you A, B, C, and D, this is what you need to do. It's
Right.
critically important. And I tell you, I'm sitting here in Orlando now. I live in Malibu, California, but I'm sitting in Malibu, in Orlando now because I was at home in Malibu since March 13th, all by myself.
Yes.
And it was wonderful. It was a glorious time. But
Yes.
after a while, I began to ask myself questions. I began to answer my questions. But the worst of it was I began to like my answers. And even
Yes.
though most times I was right, there was something missing. There
Yes.
was something missing. And I was in my head. I kept saying I was in my head. And while I wasn't imagining, anyone bursting down my door and wreaking havoc or any terrible things, I just wasn't anchored. I needed to be with people. I bought myself a respirator and a number of different masks and coverings. I got on an airplane and I came to Orlando, where I'm here with one of my daughters and my three grandchildren. And I feel so much better,
Yes.
so much better. We cannot isolate ourselves.
Right.
We cannot rely solely on our spiritual therapy. We must add that other piece where that where a trained professional can help us, guide us through our challenges. As long as
And
we have trauma in this world, we will have a need for God in our lives and a need for a therapist who's been trained.
and as you mentioned, that family connection, no matter who you consider to be family, whether they're blood relatives or those
Right.
you've adopted, that connection to family is so critically important.
Yes. And
Um, I have been so concerned, like being in California, but having family
mhm,
other places all across the country.
yes.
And first and foremost, being most concerned that my mother, was alone in Chicago. And so, and not just alone, and she was like, "Are you concerned?" Because I'm like, "We've got to see you. We got to get to you." She's like, "Are you concerned something's going to happen to me?" It's more so, this was the year that I was supposed to see you more,
Uh,
not less.
yeah.
This, was the year
Had
that,
a plan, huh?
right, right. We've had so many things planned, but it just could not happen because of, what was happening with, the pandemic. And so finally I convinced her, because she was nervous and I was too. Even though we were living, we were following the rules. We were staying in, doing our, like, okay, let's hunker down, get through this so we can get back to life as
Yeah,
we
back to life.
in back to life. I love that. Back to life. And even if things were going to be a little different, because we know we're not going back to the way things were.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Thank
Exactly.
you. It will never be the same.
It
We
won't.
will never have what we had before. And that could be a really good thing
Yes.
because we were marching to a drum that was, I believe, was not necessarily healthy for us
Right.
all.
Right. Very much so. So when I was finally convinced my mother to let me come and check on her, uh, it was so healing and restorative. I cannot I cannot describe what it wasn't about worry or fear. It was just needing that connection,
Mhm.
needing, to plug into her. And I knew on some level, even though she's a big girl, she needed to plug into me too.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, and it was so beautiful. She
yeah.
actually wrote me a thank you letter,
Oh,
a thank you card for
oh, hold on to that. Hold on
exactly.
to that.
She
Hold
writes notes
on.
and cards all the time, but I was like, thanking me for coming, and it was her birthday. I got to see her the first time of her birthday weekend, and it
Oh,
was just so, so special. And then was able to go back after Jada finished the play for fall, Pepperdine's fall theater production, and took Jada to see
yeah.
her. But I mean, and even for Jada, even though she was in class pretty much the whole time,
Mhm. Yeah,
didn't have and had a lot of work, it
right.
was just so healing and restorative to connect with her. And so
I
those things are so important.
Yeah, I will say to that, this pandemic has been devastating, and many of us lost loved ones. I mean,
Tons.
too many have
Too
died
many. Too many.
and are still dying. This pandemic is not
Yes.
over. People are still dying daily. Um, we must cherish the relationships we have. Take no one for granted.
Absolutely.
No one for granted. Cherish the relationships. My father was in a nursing home. He got pneumonia. And they said, oh, he's much better now. And the next thing you know, we got a
Mm,
call. They're rushing him to the hospital. He had tested negative for COVID, but
mm,
they were rushing him to the hospital because the pneumonia had come back. And I was like, no, this is not good.
mm,
We were not able to be with him in the hospital. My sister got to see him as they were taking him out of the ambulance into the emergency room. And he recognized her, waved. Finally, in his final hours, they allowed
mm,
my sister to be with him, clothed in PPE. And
mm-hmm,
she gave me the telephone, uh, FaceTimed me so that I could pray with my father
mm,
in his final moments. I cherish those moments. I remember the last words my father said to me. And he said, I walked into the room and he said, you make things happen. Because
mm,
I had shown up at the nursing home unexpectedly, and many of my sisters and brothers also came. And they went in, and he was glad to see everybody. And then I walked in, and he knew that because I had come to town, because he lived in Baltimore and I was in Malibu, and because I had come to town, everyone had come together. He said, you make things happen. I
mm.
treasure those words.
Yes.
I treasure. My father spoke life into me in those
Yes.
moments. It was my father's blessing. You make things happen. And I
Yes.
live that out daily. Treasure the moments that you have with relatives and friends. Take no one for granted because we never know. We never know. In this pandemic, very intentional.
Absolutely.
Treasure the moments. Take no one for granted.
And thank you so much for sharing that story. And, I learned about the passing of your father and express my condolences, and I do today. And I appreciate you sharing, that heartfelt story. And another, key, wisdom key around how we need to treasure those moments.
Yes.
One thing that has really, I've, because of, I've had so much loss in my life from a very early age on. I really try not to take anyone, anything, any day, for granted. And I would say that I want people, I want to give people their flowers while they're here,
Yes.
and that flowers metaphorically can mean lots of different things. But now even it's being more intentional about really giving flowers. Like when I never really understood why people went all out for people once they're gone. I'm like,
Mhm.
you need to appreciate and value people while they're here, whether it's whatever you would say to them or say as a dedication to them when they're not here after they're gone, say it to them while they're here. Let them know how much you appreciate it. Go and visit, spend time, call, check, so I was already doing those things as much as I could, but especially this year, it's been amplified on
Yes.
a whole nother level because it is so crystal clear that we really have no idea how much time we have with anyone.
That's true.
And
In
so
this,
I look at your flowers and it reminded me, it's like we have to give people their flowers while they're here.
in this pandemic, a word of advice is call a friend.
Yes.
Call a friend. Call an associate, and call an enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If we want to be real, call a friend,
Absolutely.
call
And
an
it's interesting that
associate,
you say that.
call an enemy. And even
Or
if you
someone who
can't
may
call
seem like they're an enemy even for a season. But
all
yes,
of that, we know we each know who those persons
yes,
who fit into those categories. Call them.
yes. The
And
frenemy
if you're
and the
not
enemy.
ready to make the call, then send a note, the good old thank you note, the good old note, handwritten note that says,
Yes,
thinking of you. That's all you have to
yes,
do, thinking of you,
yes, absolutely.
or go online to any platform that's available and send an electronic card.
Yes.
Okay. And so you can work your way from being distant with your enemy and just saying, thinking of you, to
Mm-hmm.
to getting to the point where we can actually pick up the phone and say, hey, how are you doing? I was just thinking about you. Now, yes, your enemy is going to floor them, but it will free you. It
Absolutely.
will free you. The more we can do for others, the more we do for ourselves. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I knew that we would dig into the crevices and get to some things that,
Correct.
people may think about, but may not have the courage to do. And I hope that, as people are watching this, they really take to heart, you know, take the baby steps, start with the things that are easier. And if we've said anything today that seems a little bit more challenging, I challenge you to do this. I'm not suggesting something that I wouldn't do or haven't done myself because I've done that along the way. I've reached out to that old boss who really hurt me in lots of ways and brought healing and
Yeah.
restoration to a relationship that seemed dead.
Well,
So whether it's professionally, personally, it's so important,
yeah.
to do the things that we've mentioned. And now I really want to shift into that collective healing and rebuilding we need to do as a nation.
Okay.
So I'm going to let you go wherever you want to go with that and how you want to start off, and we'll wrap up with this.
Well, what we do as a nation, we
Yes.
begin with the individual, yes, and we spread out to the nation. What we do for ourselves, we must do for others. In
Yes.
that but we must become very political. And I don't mean that we choose a party and we dogmatically stick with that party. That's not healthy.
Yes.
Um, we bring our collective energies, our collective intelligence to the table, and we sit down and we look at each other, we talk to each other. We must have open dialogue with each other. But more importantly, we must be political.
Yes.
Our personal becomes political. What is important to us, we must promote that significantly. Um, Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives are inextricably linked." He's not the only one that has said that, but
Yes.
I do believe that what happens with me happens with my neighbor. And so our personal, what's important to me, if it's foster care, I've got to get out there and do something about foster care.
Yes.
I can't sit
Yes.
on my sofa, drink my tea, and think somebody else is doing it. It's on my heart. It's my responsibility. If it's
Yes.
Alzheimer's, we've got to get out and do that. If it's cancer research, we've got to get out and do that. Our personal has to become political. We cannot sit idly by and expect our elected officials to
Yes.
do to bring this country to healing. We must do it. It's our
Absolutely.
responsibility. It's our country.
Yes.
We built it and we must sustain it.
Yes.
There are those that have said to me with regard to racial healing, we as people of color are always teaching white folk how and why and when and what, right? And this friend said, why is it that we always have to teach them our lives? Yeah, I feel the
We're the
same.
only ones who know it the way we
We're
know
the
it.
only ones who know. You better say it, sis. You better say it.
No
We
one knows it like we know
know
it.
it. We live it.
Yes.
And while it seems wrong, while it seems, like more hurt, it's necessary. It's
Absolutely.
necessary. They haven't walked in our shoes. They have not been objectified. They have not been, not in the way that we have
Not in
racially.
the way we have.
They have
Right.
not walked into a room and been immediately disregarded because of the color of their skin. I love this commercial. Gosh, there is a commercial on television with this black man and a young boy, and they're walking together, and people are watching them, and they're watching the people. They go to a pool, a public pool, and people are watching them, and they're watching the people get out of the pool because they got in.
Mhm.
All sorts of things. They go to a store, and people are watching you. They get the eye, right? And
Mhm.
then the commercial moves, the camera moves to a courtroom, and everyone is seated waiting, and the judge walks in, and all rise, everybody stands up. Well, the judge is the same man that was walking with the little boy,
Yes.
that everybody was giving him the eye, the one that they got out of the pool because he was there because of the color of
Yes.
his skin. We've got to get beyond those moments. And we've got to teach. We've got to use television. We've got to use media to teach, just as you are
Thank you.
doing.
Say that. Say that.
We've got to use media to teach.
Yes.
We've got to sit down and watch those movies. We've got to share the story with our children. Our
Yes.
Jewish brothers and sisters have done a wonderful
Oh,
job
yes.
of sharing the story.
Yes.
It is not that you're indoctrinating someone against someone. You're speaking truth. If you don't know the truth, you won't know who you are. Oh my goodness, I get excited about moments like this. Our personal has to become political. We've got to do something about what we're thinking and feeling, what's in our spirit. We've got to do something positive about it.
Absolutely.
The National Women's Political Council. I highly recommend that organization to everyone. The National Women's Political Council.
Mm.
They teach and train women to become politicians.
Mm.
You do not have to become a politician to be part of the group. You don't even have to be female to be part of the group.
Mhm.
But it is the National Women's Political Council. We can become informed about politics and how to take our personal and make it political. We
Yes.
become informed about it. We become informed about how our elected officials get into place, and we can be helpful to them as they lead our nation. Our personal has to become political.
Yes,
I'm
thank
gonna
you
stop.
so much. I want to I want to follow up on something that you said earlier about us continuing to educate others who don't really understand systemic racism and don't really understand the path to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's so important, even though if we may have said the same thing, we need to say it again, because one thing I wanted to point out is everyone is not necessarily in the place to hear and receive it as we're delivering the message. And they have to be in that position and ready to embrace what they're hearing and to be able to receive it in order to process it and begin to heal themselves and begin to restore and rebuild. So it may take several times for them to hear, because they've got their own defenses, they've got their own filters that we have to work through. So it's so important to not just say, well, I told them once, or I told them twice, or I told them 10 times. As long as it takes to get that captive audience, that captive receptive hearing, feeling, they've got to connect the hearing with the feeling with the cognitive in order to process it all. And it takes time. And I thank you so much for saying that, because I also have heard that. And I love to have the discussions. I invite the discussions. Most are not open to. So I wish I had more people coming to me to say, let's have this discussion. I want to understand. I actually got involved with a racial reconciliation ministry out of Fellowship Monrovia. And when we talked about the political, Pastor Albert Tate said last week, I'm going to need you to do some things a little bit differently. When you go to vote, don't vote your values on election day and then we don't see you live out those values for the 4 years. You have to live your vote, activate your vote on a personal level, and not just become so holier than thou that you vote these values and you think these things are so important. Abortion, for example, then you don't do anything about it. You don't provide support to young people or any woman who is in a situation who needs help, and cast off, people. But you're living up here when you vote, but we don't see any evidence of your values outside of the voting booth. You're on mute.
I put it on mute because I heard a noise and didn't want
Okay.
that to disturb your wording there. But we must have fruit.
Yes.
Fruit that remains. It's
Yes.
very biblical.
Yes.
Fruit that remains. We can talk all day, but if
Yes.
we take action,
Yes.
if we don't take action and bear fruit that is lasting, then we're like sounding brass and clanging cymbals, just making noise, just
Absolutely.
making noise. We must have fruit that remains. And when I say fruit that remains, it takes me to um, teach, train, tutor, right? Teach a
Mhm.
person, train a person, tutor a person. That goes right back to having to tell our friends and allies over and over and over again, because they don't live this experience. They don't know this experience. They can intellect. We've got to teach it. We've got to train it. We've got to tutor people in it. And then we have to take it to a point where we're really bold.
Yes.
We're really bold. We tend to be too timid
Yes.
about our experience, because as soon as we play the race card, then we're wrong. Well, don't let anybody use that to take away your power.
Yes.
You know, if it is a racial situation, name it. name it. But we've got to name it and do these things in a spirit of reconciliation. It's not a, you did me wrong, now
Right.
I'm going to get you. You did me wrong. You have a spirit that doesn't understand. Let me teach, train, and tutor you, whether I like it or not. Because one day, this very person is going to be your ally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not just your ally, but we must do the same for the generations that are following us, that
Yes.
are coming behind us. One day, you see how white my hair is? One day, I'm going to sit in a rocking chair and enjoy the fruit that
Yes.
but
Yes.
there will be no fruit if I don't see something in someone, and if I don't seed something in someone. This is how we're going to do it together.
Absolutely. My
Together.
mentor, CT Vivian, did a
Oh,
race awareness workshop, and I met him, doing that workshop.
mm-hmm.
And I saw, because he used a reconciliation process to teach race awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and that connection and, that apology, once you've acknowledged and kind of worked through what the issues have been, there has to be an exchange. And, and you have to, admit, the wrong and call it out and apologize on both sides, whatever that is, in order to really begin healing
Right.
and being able to rebuild and restore. And he demonstrated that so powerfully,
He was
in
also
the workshop by, because he had flipped the script during the workshop where white people got to experience what it felt like to be Black. And he grabbed
mm-hmm.
them by their hands, stood in their faces, looked them in their eyes, and apologized and modeled what real reconciliation looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen anything so powerful. I mean, I've literally seen the spirits of white men and women change in that
And
moment.
mm-hmm. You know, Kelly,
And we need more of that.
that's so important, because so many will say, number one, a lot of people don't want to have the conversations because they are afraid they're going to say something wrong. They're
Right.
afraid they're going to use the wrong language. They're afraid they're going to upset someone. Well, if we don't work through it, if
Right.
we don't move beyond our fear, then we will never get resolution. You got to
Yes.
have the conversations. You got to have the conversations. I want us to be clear that an apology, saying, I'm sorry that this happened, that's not an apology. A child will say, I'm sorry. Mommy will say, now tell them you're sorry. I'm sorry. That doesn't fix it.
No.
There's something called atonement,
Yes.
repentance. You've got
Absolutely.
to demonstrate a repentant spirit.
Yes.
We're working with the situation right now. The person said, I'm sorry. And others are saying, I don't see what the problem is. He said he was sorry. Yes, he was sorry the situation happened. He wasn't sorry for what he did.
Right.
He did not take ownership for it.
Right.
He is not putting forth any action now that
Exactly.
says, I'm going to take personal responsibility for what I
Yes.
did and
Right.
try to fix this. No, he's just saying, I'm sorry. So now, can't we move on?
Right.
Where
Thank you so much for
in the church
clarifying that.
setting, where is the grace? But
Yes.
can somebody give me grace? But the Bible says, confess your sins one to
Yes.
another. You know,
Yes.
it says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves,
Yes.
humble,
Yes.
seek my face and pray and turn from their wicked ways.
Yes.
Then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal the land. All of this has to happen before There is a hearing from heaven, a forgiveness of sin,
Yes.
and a healing, right?
Yes.
Turn from your wicked ways. That's critically important. I'm sorry. You can say I'm sorry. You can
Right.
apologize. But if you don't turn,
Absolutely.
and I don't mean 360, I mean 180.
180.
If you don't
Absolutely.
turn, then you've not done anything but wasted your breath, hot
Yes.
air. And
There's
people
definitely
know the
power.
difference. From children, little children know the difference.
Yes. There
So,
is power in forgive me, and here's what I'm going to do differently as a result of
gee,
this. And this is
yes.
what we can do together moving forward. That is how you heal,
Mm,
rebuild, and restore. Thank you so much.
right.
I I didn't think we would use every single minute that you had until President Gash gives his address.
Yes, yes. I enjoy you. I appreciate.
Same here.
I value
Same here.
the work that you are doing is tremendous, and this is an
Thank you so
example of
much.
what we have to do going forward. And
Thank
so,
you.
yes, I pray that everybody on Facebook and YouTube will get this and remember to come back to your work time and time and time again, because you have
Thank you.
I see something. You have an important voice for the nation, an important voice for the world. I see something, and I'm
Thank you.
sowing those seeds into you right now. And
I
I pray
receive
that
it.
there will be much fruit that remains.
Thank
Bless
you
you.
so, so much. And God bless you. And as I knew we would, when we came together to talk about these things, that God would meet us here,
Boy,
and deliver. And I'm so grateful for you, or the past 8, 9 years of you sowing into me. This is not the first time you've sown into me and to Jada, and I'm just so grateful for
bless
you. And I look forward to continuing these conversations. We'd love to have you back. And do me a favor before you go. Please
Mhm.
let people know how to follow you, social media, how to stay connected, and if there's anything that you'd like, where you'd like to direct people for anything
Yeah,
that you're plugged into, please say so.
I am on, if it's social media, I'm there. Facebook, Instagram, Helen Easterling Williams, REVHEW at REVHEW on Instagram. I'm there.
Mm.
Holla.
I can't wait to talk offline and back online. And thank you for the shout out and
Mhm.
the endorsement of our
Positive
mission
impact
around
campaign.
using media and entertainment for social change. It's so
Positive
critical.
impact campaign. Go there.
Thank you. Thank
Love
you so much. Love you. Take
love
care and
you.
God bless.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Wow, what a blessing. As I mentioned, just such a powerful voice for a time such as this. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Take care.